Hey friends, Ari Koinuma here. Thanks for joining. Today I want to share with you my thoughts on a subject that is near and dear to my heart, which is sensitivity. And I want to share with you my own observations and the way I sort of consider sensitivity, in the hopes that if you are sensitive, it might give you some new ways to think about it. If you're not sensitive, then it might give you some insights as to what sensitive people might think and feel like. And either way, hopefully you will find this insightful and useful as you navigate your life. So, a highly sensitive person is the title of the book that Dr. Elain Aron published in 1996 for the first time. Although the research has been done before then to measure these traits. And she's since written many books. I don't have the original book with me right now. This one is The Highly Sensitive Person in Love by Dr. Aron. And she has a website in which you can take a test to see if you where you fall in the spectrum of sensitivity. Now, what I'm about to share with you is really my own thoughts and observations, not like retelling of all the theories and observations that she made. So this is not like a scientific sort of information, right, based on research. It's just my own personal point of view on it. So you are free to disagree or to dispute any of the things that I said, but these are the things that I see with my own eyes in my personal experience. Again, there's always the expert and authority in the field, the official word and the definition and what that means. And then there is personal experiences and stories that I always find it more, well, I wouldn't say more illuminating, I would find it equally illuminating to hear personal stories of how that sort of the core concept plays out in somebody's life or in somebody's point of view. So I hope you get something out of this. This is something that I really enjoy talking about. So anyway, here we go. Okay, so we start out with our senses. So I'm going to draw a person's head. And we have what I might call traditional 5 senses, right? So we have the sight, we have the hearing, we have the smell, we have the taste, and we have touch. And these 5, I like to call them like antennas, right? They are like antennas or sensors that are designed to pick up certain information and give it to your brain. And as you probably can expect, they're not all like set up at the same strength for different people. Some people might have, obviously, like we have different for eyesight, right? For example, or some people might be able to hear something that other people can't. That kind of refers to like a raw strength or sensitivity in terms of how strong that sense is. However, there is a different nuance to the sensitivity I'm talking about. In the people who are considered a highly sensitive person may not have, like for example, strong eyesight, may not be able to see farther than normal people, but the information that they get through their eyes, they seem to pick up more details. So imagine, like for example, we're looking at a whiteboard, right? And to most, how should I say, I hate the word normal or regular, but in non-sensitive eyes, let's say, you look at it and say, that's a whiteboard, right? But then a highly sensitive person might go, okay, it's a glass whiteboard. It is put up in a landscape manner. And then there is a tiny blemish at the corner, or there might be a little whole, or it might be a little crooked actually. You see, a highly sensitive person picks up a lot more information from basically a certain sort of stimulation or input, and that is part of the sensitivity, or that is more of what the sensitivity that we refer to is in this context. So it's not really about the raw strength of these senses, but in terms of how much information do you get from a given input in any one or many of these senses. So we have these 5 senses, but in my opinion, this is not all. Actually, we have 2 more, well, possibly 2 or more senses in addition to this. One of which I might call a spiritual sense. And I'm going to put it kind of up here because it's not really connected to any of this. It is something that's in us, but again, I'm going to kind of put it somewhere separately. And I might put things like intuition in here. Intuition, if you ask me, is sense or sensor that picks up information that you really don't have any other way of knowing through the traditional senses. And then you kind of wonder, wait, where did that come from? How do I know these things, right? And it doesn't really make sense, but in my experience, and I know people, and myself included, it definitely exists, this antenna. And I think it's an area of human psyche that is really less sort of studied, or it's more mystified. It's a little bit beyond the current reach of science at this time. So it's hard to really sort of legitimize it and then have sort of an organized thought around it. But in my opinion, it's definitely there, and it's stronger on some people, not so strong on some people. I suspect that it's not that there are people who don't have this at all, but it just, you might be out of touch since this is not one of these physical senses. Spiritual antenna might also include like ability to talk to perhaps spirits or angels or other entities. And then also certain people, like they might call themselves mediums, seem to be able to talk to human souls of those who are not alive anymore. I would kind of lump them all together as kind of a spiritual antenna. I might be sort of lumping something together, maybe they shouldn't, but this is an area that I myself don't have clear understanding either, except to say that I have some of these things, and it is a source of information. And then finally, there is the 7th sense that I'm going to put down here. Empathy. And this is an interesting sense. Empathy refers to our ability to feel emotions from other humans and probably like other higher living things like certain animals. Not thoughts, just feelings, and feelings are energy, and we kind of can experience to some extent what somebody else is feeling. And then the interesting thing about empathy is that empathy relies on other senses to deliver that information. So, for example, I get a lot of information through watching somebody talk, right? I get a lot of information when I'm on the phone, talking to somebody and just listening to their voice. And I also believe that you can get empathy through spiritual channel, in that you might get feelings of, like, let's say somebody you care about, or a family member, or somebody you feel deeply connected to, in ways that don't really fall into one of the traditional senses. But it definitely exists in that I feel that I can feel the energy and feelings of people that I'm engaged with, and if I really tuned in hard, I can really feel it almost as if they are my own. It's really vivid and strong. In fact, I feel that for me, I think empathy is my most sensitive sense. I don't feel that I'm particularly exceptional. Exceptional is not the right word, it's just sensitive, right? It's not that having sensitivity is good or bad. It can be either depending on the situation here. But my empathy is very strong, and it's not that like I walk around and like I can tell about things about people, like everybody around me. It's not like a totally psychic ability, although I know it might come across like that. I do need to tune in to somebody to sort of utilize my empathy. But that being said, when I tune in, I do get a lot of information, a lot more than what they may be telling me or what I can see through my eyes. So we have 7 total senses that each of us humans have, and all these are sort of calibrated for each of us at varying degrees of raw strength in terms of how perceptive they are, and then in terms of sensitivity, in terms of how much information we get from each of these. And what I'm telling you is that I learned a cool word the other day. It's called neurodiversity, and it just basically talks about how different we are, how our brains and senses are so varied that our experience just cannot be the same. And I always use an analogy of, let's say that there's a chair in the middle of a room, or maybe I'll draw a chair if I can, right? So there's a chair, but no two people can have the same experience of the chair at the same time, because you can't stand exactly where I'm standing. So this angle, looking at and interpreting this chair, cannot be shared by somebody who's standing next to me, but looking at the chair from the exact same angle. That is to say that, for example, you might grow up as a sibling and you might be exposed to the same parents, but you have vastly different experience of what family, what life was like, and what events do you remember, and how do you remember it, and what you remember about those events. And all this to say is that there's just this vast diversity in terms of how humans experience life, and this is the most important point that I want to make. None of us, not a single one of us, can look at any other people and say, hey, I understand or I know what your experience is. And just because, for example, you don't feel that there's a spiritual antenna built into human beings, and these people having these experiences of receiving information from this antenna, right, cannot discount the possibility that it still might be there, and it is totally, perfectly, legitimately, mundanely present experience of having information through this channel. So I've learned in my adult life to listen with as much as I can muster without any preconceived notions or judgment about what the other person is telling me. Whatever they're telling to me is true to them, right? And it might not be the same as my experience. It might not be something that I've never experienced. It doesn't come remotely to anything close to what I've experienced. I might not have a frame of reference. I may not be able to understand. I may not be able to relate. That doesn't make the other person's experience invalid. I do not have the right to say, hey, what you're saying is not true, since I don't see it that way, right? And that idea of radical acceptance of all human experience, I believe, contributes to us being having empathy about things like discrimination, right? Racism, sexism, ageism, or what have you. In that some people experiencing these things, and you might be on the other side going, I don't see this, right? And then you might be going, well, I don't see it. What are you talking about? That to me is, well, if you believe what I'm saying, can be refuted by understanding this, that how different we are and how our senses work differently for different people, and therefore we can conclude that what's true to somebody else may not seem sort of relatable, familiar, or plausible to somebody else, but yet we have to start with the point of view that everybody's experience, everybody's perception, everybody's senses are telling them stories that is true to that person. Sensitive people, highly sensitive people, have had the history of feeling misunderstood because there was not as much understanding of this concept out in the society. Dr. Aron's book came out in 1996, so it's a little over 20 years old, and this kind of information takes a long time to spread in the society, and particularly highly sensitive people are not exactly prone to get up on the podium and start preaching and start fighting for their rights and understanding. That's a bit stressful and overwhelming for them, a lot of the highly sensitive people. So what they've done is to stay quiet and to just hide, because a lot of us have had the experience of coming out and sharing your experience, and other people going, I don't see it. It's just a whiteboard. What's the big deal? Right? That kind of response sort of breaks our heart, because we're like, wait a minute, don't you notice that it's actually glass and it's actually cracked in some places and it needs to be cleaned in other places, and it's a little crooked and it has holes and all this other information? And they're going, it's just a whiteboard. It's possible for people who don't have the sensitivity to still understand the sensitive people, especially if you can understand this concept. And hence here I am showing up trying to explain this in my own words. Now for sensitive folks, since they've had the heartache or heartbreak of showing up and not being understood, naturally that is very disappointing, and for a lot of people that I've observed, it gets stuck as an unprocessed feeling in their system, so they keep pleading to unreceptive folks, going, hey, look, this is my sensitivity, can you understand it? And keep repeating that experience of not being understood. So if you watched my other videos, to you I would say, if you're sensitive, grieve the painful experiences of sharing your perception, your story, and not being understood. And if you can grieve and if you can fully process that grief, then you can get through to the other side, other end of the tunnel, in which then you are free to accept the reality that obviously not everybody is sensitive, and that's not a bad thing, and that if you're trying to get people who can't understand, who cannot share our sensitivity, to really understand what it's like to be sensitive, it's nobody's fault, but it's really, you're asking, you know, somebody to do something that they're not capable of. According to Dr. Aron's research, 15 to 20% of the population, men and women, are classifiable as highly sensitive. So there are a lot of us out there, a lot more than we might realize, because many of us are quiet or in denial or just not aware. But I would like to do my part to speak up and say, hey, this is who I am. I would love for you to understand me, to accept me as I am, and if you are like me, then I'm available to connect with you, to talk with you, to discuss how do we navigate this life with this trait that we have, which is, again, neither good or bad. In certain situations, it's a terrific strength, and I can almost think of it as almost like a superpower, but in the wrong situation, it's a terrible weakness and vulnerability, and it puts us in a very awkward and uncomfortable positions. We have to accept what we are for what we are, and just make adjustments in terms of then how do we go about life, right? And then as a society, I would love for us to recognize that, yeah, some people have high sensitivity, and these are the situations in where those traits will offer tremendous value, and they enjoy having that value too. So let's learn about this trait. Let's learn to put people in the right places where they can thrive, where they are appreciated, where they bring value, and make the world a better place. Okay, so that's all I have for you today. I appreciate you watching and listening to my own take on what sensitivity means. Whatever responses you have, whether you agree or disagree, I would love to know, so please leave me a comment if you have any questions as well. I am on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, so feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, or if you want to have a little bit more private dialogue. This is again something near and dear to my heart, so if you have any things that you want to discuss, please feel free to reach out to me. Alright, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.